Loretta Hayes found a quiet joy in her flower garden. It was her sanctuary, a vibrant splash of color and life in the otherwise rigidly uniform landscape of the Willow Creek Manor Homeowners Association. That morning, she just placed the finishing touch, a small, beautifully hand-carved wooden sign nestled amongst her prize-winning roses that simply read Hayes Garden. It was a personal, unassuming marker of her little patch of peace. She was still admiring it, a trowel in her hand, when Mr. Victor Sinclair, the HOA president, a man whose jowls quivered with perpetual indignation and whose primary joy seemed to be enforcing arbitrary rules, stormed onto her lawn. He was flanked by two glowering HOA board members, looking like reluctant stormtroopers. "Hayes, what is that? That abomination!" Victor Sinclair bellowed, his face already mottling with anger as he jabbed a thick finger towards her new garden sign. "That is an unapproved commercial-grade advertising placard. It is a vulgar eyesore and a blatant violation of Willow Creek Manor's aesthetic covenants. Section 12, Paragraph D, regarding unauthorized signage." Loretta straightened, wiping a smudge of dirt from her cheek, her initial surprise quickly turning to disbelief. "Mr. Sinclair, good morning. This is hardly commercial advertising. It's a small, personal garden sign. Hayes Garden. It's simply the name of my garden." "Nonsense. Sinclair Street. It's self-promotion. It's tacky. It's Cecketering in floral form. You're probably planning to sell your weeds next. This is a distinguished residential community, Ms. Hayes, not some back-alley botanical bazaar." Before Loretta could utter another word of protest, one of Sinclair's companions, a lanky man named Gary, produced a can of black spray paint. With a vicious hiss, he completely obliterated Loretta's carefully lettered sign, leaving a dripping, ugly black blotch on the beautiful wood. "No!" Loretta cried out, a wave of shock and anger washing over her. "That was handcrafted. That was my property. You have no right to deface it." "No right?" Victor Sinclair chuckled, a nasty, triumphant sound. He then raised a megaphone, which his other associate, a woman with a permanently sour expression named Mildred, handed to him. "Attention, Willow Creek Manor." His amplified voice, dripping with self-importance, echoed through the pristine, silent street. "Your diligent HOA has taken immediate action against the unsightly and unapproved promotional signage erected by the resident at 47 Primrose Path. This individual, Ms. Loretta Hayes, has been attempting to turn her property into a garish commercial enterprise, thereby degrading our community's aesthetic and lowering our collective property values. She is a self-aggrandizing show-off, and we will not tolerate such blatant disregard for our rules." Show-off? Degrading property values with a small garden sign? The accusations were so ludicrous, so disconnected from reality, that Loretta felt a moment of dizzying disbelief. Neighbors, drawn by Sinclair's booming pronouncements, began to emerge from their homes, their faces a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Some, clearly Sinclair's staunchest supporters, were already nodding in agreement. "What's that sign she put up anyway?" One woman whispered loudly to her friend, craning her neck. "Looked like something you'd see at a cheap nursery." "Victor's absolutely right to get rid of it," another man shouted from his porch, emboldened by Sinclair's aggressive stance. "We don't need that kind of advertising trash here. Probably attract all sorts of undesirable elements." A group of teenagers, snickering, then began to deliberately walk across the edge of Loretta's meticulously tended flower bed, crushing several prize-winning irises under their sneakers, clearly for Sinclair's approval. "This is vandalism, slander, incitement," Loretta stated, her voice now trembling with a cold, controlled fury that few who knew her professionally would ever have recognized. "You are trespassing, destroying private property, and publicly defaming me based on ridiculous, baseless accusations." "Baseless?" Sinclair sneered, clearly reveling in the confrontation. Mildred was now gleefully filming the entire scene with her smartphone, focusing on Loretta's distressed face and the defaced sign. "We have photographic evidence of your signage violation, Ms. Hayes, and your defiant attitude. It'll all be on the HOA website by lunchtime, a warning to anyone else who thinks they can flout our community standards. He then produced a pre-printed HOA citation form. And for your flagrant disregard of Willow Creek Manor's covenants, your erection of an unauthorized commercial sign, and the cost of aesthetic remediation, you are hereby fined $300, payable within 48 hours. He thrust the citation at her. And be warned, Ms. Hayes, if that defaced piece of junk and whatever other promotional materials you have aren't completely removed by then, the fines will increase exponentially, and we will initiate legal proceedings to have you declared a public nuisance and removed from this community. $300, eviction, for a small hand-carved sign that said Hayes Garden. Loretta, a woman who presided over complex federal civil rights cases, who weighed arguments on constitutional law, was being subjected to this petty, ignorant, and clearly racially motivated tyranny over a piece of wood and some flowers. The video, titled Willow Creek HOA Battles Residents Tacky Advertising and Defiant Outburst, зрение появилось online с молниеносной скоростью. It was a masterpiece of selective editing, making Loretta look unhinged and aggressive, and Victor Sinclair the calm, reasonable defender of neighborhood decency. The comments section was a predictable cesspool of racist remarks, classist snobbery, and gleeful support for Sinclair's strong leadership. Good for Victor. We don't need her kind of garden art here. She probably was trying to sell something. Those people always are. Judge Loretta Hayes, a pillar of the federal judiciary, a woman whose rulings had shaped civil rights law for a generation, stood in her violated garden, her beautiful sign defaced, her prize-winning flowers crushed, her character assassinated by a petty despot whose understanding of law or decency was non-existent. The injustice was a bitter pill, but as she looked at Victor Sinclair's smug, triumphant face, a different kind of judicial temperament began to stir within her. Not the impartial arbiter, but the fierce, unwavering advocate for justice. He thought he had won a battle over a garden sign. He had no idea he had just picked a fight with the full, unyielding weight of the United States legal system, embodied in one very angry, very determined federal judge. His little HOA kingdom was about to be overruled with extreme prejudice. The defacement of her Hayes Garden sign and the ludicrous $300 fine were, for Judge Loretta Hayes, not just petty annoyances. They were a blatant declaration of war on her property rights and a clear signal of Mr. Victor Sinclair's tyrannical intent. While Sinclair was busy on the Willow Creek Manor HOA's online forum, boasting about his swift action to curb unsightly advertising and maintain our community's pristine image, Loretta was on a secure conference call with her former law clerks, now high-powered attorneys at some of the nation's top civil rights and constitutional law firms. He spray-painted your personal garden sign, called it commercial advertising, and fined you for it after his goons trampled your prize-winning irises? One of her former clerks, now a partner at a renowned First Amendment practice, had asked, his voice a mixture of disbelief and lawyerly glee. Loretta, this isn't just an HOA dispute. This is a gift-wrapped Section 1983 civil rights violation lawsuit with punitive damages written all over it. This Sinclair fellow is either monumentally ignorant of the law or monumentally arrogant, or both. Both, I suspect, Loretta had replied, a grim smile touching her lips. Prepare a preliminary cease and desist, Michael. Make it polite, but make it abundantly clear that any further acts of vandalism, trespass, defamation, or attempts to levy baseless fines will result in immediate and severe federal litigation against the HOA and Mr. Sinclair personally. Victor Sinclair received the letter, noted the letterhead from a prestigious Washington, D.C. law firm, and promptly dismissed it as more scare tactics from the tacky sign lady and her shyster friends. He actually read excerpts of it aloud at an emergency HOA Garden Purity Subcommittee meeting, a committee he'd formed that morning, consisting of himself, Gary the spray painter, and Mildred the sour-faced filmer. His voice dripping with sarcasm. Listen to this legal gobbledygook, he'd sneered. Tortious interference with quiet enjoyment of property, intentional infliction of emotional distress. She thinks she can frighten us with these $10 words? Well, we, the decent homeowners of Willow Creek Manor, will not be intimidated by some uppity outsider trying to turn our beautiful neighborhood into a billboard for her weeds. His Garden Purity initiative quickly escalated into a full-blown campaign of harassment designed to make Loretta's life a living hell and force her to either capitulate or leave. He pushed the HOA board, a group of mostly spineless individuals who rubber-stamped his every whim out of fear or apathy, to enact a series of new, ludicrously specific, and clearly targeted emergency landscaping and aesthetic amendments. Amendment 27F. All private flower gardens visible from any public thoroughfare or adjacent property must consist of no less than 60% HOA-approved neutral tone perennials. See Appendix J for approved list, mostly beige and pale green varieties, and no more than 10% vibrantly colored annuals. Amendment 28G. Any garden signage, including purely decorative or personal identification markers, must not exceed 6 inches by 4 inches, be constructed only of HOA-approved simulated driftwood, and feature lettering in Times New Roman, non-bold, 12-point font only. All other signage is deemed visual pollution and subject to immediate removal and a $100 daily fine. The online slander campaign intensified. Sinclair, using various anonymous sock puppet accounts, began posting concerned neighbor complaints on local community forums about the neglected and potentially hazardous state of Loretta's garden, which was in reality immaculate, albeit now missing its sign. He insinuated that her strange exotic plants, her prize-winning hybrid tea roses and rare heirloom tomatoes, were attracting dangerous pests, or were invasive species that could destroy the neighborhood's delicate ecosystem. He even started a rumor that she was using illegal carcinogenic pesticides that were making neighborhood children sick. The comments sections became a predictable cesspool of fear-mongering, racist innuendo, and calls for Loretta's immediate eviction. How could one man's petty vindictiveness be allowed to poison an entire community with such baseless, hateful lies? Loretta, meanwhile, endured this siege with the outward calm and meticulous attention to detail that had defined her distinguished judicial career. Her home, her sanctuary, now felt like a hostile encampment, but she was a federal judge. She understood evidence, she understood due process, and she understood the profound responsibility that came with upholding the law. Her discreet, high-resolution security cameras, now positioned to cover every angle of her yard and the street beyond, were her silent, unblinking witnesses, capturing every act of trespass, every thrown piece of trash, which now included not just paper, but rotting vegetables and even small dead animals. Every slanderous drive-by shouting match from Sinclair's golf cart. The hints of her true identity, her towering stature in the American legal system, continued to be hilariously, tragically misinterpreted by Victor Sinclair and his informants, chief among them the ever-vigilant Mildred, who had now taken to patrolling past Loretta's house with a notepad and a pair of binoculars, documenting violations for the HOA legal fund. One Saturday morning, a sleek black sedan with official U.S. government plates, the kind used by federal judges for secure transport to and from their courthouses, discreetly dropped off a very distinguished, silver-haired gentleman at Loretta's curb. This was Chief Judge Alistair Finch of the U.S. Court of Appeals for their circuit, a close friend and colleague of Loretta's for over 30 years, stopping by for a quiet Sunday brunch and to offer his personal support in some off-the-record advice from a judicial ethics standpoint regarding the escalating HOA harassment. They sat on Loretta's back patio for 2 hours, their conversation a low murmur of legal strategy, constitutional principles, and shared outrage. Mildred, nearly hyperventilating from her observation post in her upstairs bathroom window, immediately called Victor. "He's here, Victor! The big boss! The head of her whole illegal sign-making, weed-growing, anti-HOA syndicate. He looked like a mafia don, or maybe a corrupt senator. They're definitely plotting to take over Willow Creek Manor. This is an organized crime situation." Victor, whose understanding of federal judiciary structure was non-existent, readily believed her. So she's not just a shyster, she's got connections to organized crime. This explains everything. We need to get the real police involved before they all end up in concrete shoes. Another time, Loretta was on a secure video conference call in her home study, the window slightly ajar. She was participating in a judicial ethics panel for the American Bar Association, discussing recent Supreme Court rulings on due process and property rights. Her voice, though low, was clear and authoritative as she cited specific case law. And as Justice Brandeis articulated in Olmsted, the right to be let alone is the most comprehensive of rights, which this HOA's actions clearly infringe upon. Furthermore, the Matthews versus Eldridge balancing test for procedural due process has been demonstrably violated by their arbitrary finding process. Mildred coincidentally weeding her petunias directly beneath Loretta's study window with a newly acquired sound-enhancing device, marketed for birdwatching, but repurposed for neighborhood snooping, caught snippets. Justice Brandeis, Olmsted, Matthews, Eldridge, procedural due process, balancing test. She rushed to Victor, her eyes wide with terror. She's talking in code, Victor! Mafia code names. Brandeis, Olmsted, Matthews, Eldridge. They must be her top lieutenants. And she mentioned a balancing test. They're probably testing explosives. This is a terrorist cell operating right here in Willow Creek Manor. Victor, now genuinely frightened by his own manufactured narrative, felt a surge of panicky self-importance. He was no longer just an HOA president. He was a frontline defender against a vast, shadowy conspiracy. He had his equally clueless HOA lawyer, Skip Peterson, who was still smarting from the cease and desist letter from Loretta's actual lawyers, draft an even more unhinged legal threat. It accused Loretta of conspiracy to commit domestic terrorism, operating an illegal horticultural enterprise with intent to distribute controlled substances, referring to her heirloom tomatoes, and using sophisticated legal jargon to intimidate and defraud the Willow Creek Manor HOA. It demanded the immediate payment of all fines, now totaling over $1,500, with daily penalties for maintaining a defiant attitude and possession of suspicious gardening tools. And it announced that the HOA was scheduling an emergency property standards adjudication and public censure hearing for Loretta Hayes the following Saturday in the community clubhouse. All residents were strongly encouraged to attend and bear witness as this threat to our community is finally and decisively addressed. Loretta received this latest missive of madness with a sigh that was equal parts exasperation and grim determination. This wasn't just about a garden sign anymore. This was about a dangerous abuse of power, a descent into delusional paranoia, and a complete disregard for the rule of law by a man who was clearly unfit to manage a potted plant, let alone a homeowners association. She looked at the invitation to her own public censure. A slow, dangerous smile touched her lips. A public hearing. How appropriate. She picked up her phone and made a call to Ben Carter, her lead counsel. Ben, she said, her voice calm and measured, Mr. Sinclair has scheduled his little show trial for Saturday. I believe it's time we arrange for a slightly more distinguished audience, and perhaps a guest speaker. Yes, I think I'll preside over that hearing myself, so to speak. Ensure our federal lawsuit is filed by Friday afternoon, with all due service to Mr. Sinclair and the board. And Ben, she added, a glint of steel in her voice, alert the U.S. Marshals. Given Mr. Sinclair's escalating delusions and his references to explosives and terrorism, I believe their presence might be prudent for maintaining order in the courtroom I'm about to create. Victor Sinclair was planning a public censure. Judge Loretta Hayes was preparing to convene a federal court of consequences, right in the heart of his petty kingdom. The Willow Creek Manor clubhouse buzzed with a mixture of nervous anticipation and malicious glee. Victor Sinclair, resplendent in his HOA president blazer, sat at a makeshift dais, a gavel in his hand, ready to preside over the emergency property standards adjudication and public censure hearing of Ms. Loretta Hayes. His most ardent supporters, including a smug Mildred, camera phone at the ready, and a glowering Gary, the spray painter, filled the front rows. He had his evidence. Blurry photos of Loretta's garden sign, Mrs. Henderson's eyewitness testimony of Loretta's suspicious gardening, and copies of the escalating fines. The special hearing is now called to order, Victor boomed, banging the gavel with unnecessary force. We are here today to address the persistent and flagrant violations of community standards by resident Loretta Hayes of 47 Primrose Path. Her unauthorized commercial signage, her defiant attitude, and her general disregard for the aesthetic harmony of Willow Creek Manor will not be tolerated. He launched into a rambling, self-righteous diatribe, accusing Loretta of everything from visual terrorism with her garden sign to potential horticultural espionage. He was clearly enjoying his moment of absolute, albeit petty power. Just as Victor was about to call for the HOA board to vote on imposing the full $25,000 fine and authorizing immediate eviction proceedings, the main doors of the clubhouse swung open. Loretta Hayes walked in. She was not cowed or disheveled. She was impeccably dressed in a dark, sharply tailored pantsuit that radiated quiet authority. And she was not alone. Flanking her were three individuals who could have walked straight out of a Supreme Court portrait. Ben Carter, her distinguished lead counsel, a woman with an equally formidable presence, introduced in whispers as a senior partner from one of D.C.'s most powerful civil rights law firms, and a third younger lawyer, meticulously organizing a thick briefcase. Victor stared, momentarily thrown. Well, well, Ms. Hayes, he sneered, quickly recovering his bluster. Decided to finally face the music, have you? And you've brought your legal entourage? Think these high-priced city lawyers can save you from Willow Creek justice? This is my hearing. Loretta approached the podium usually reserved for HOA announcements. Mr. Sinclair, she began, her voice calm, clear, and carrying an unexpected resonance that instantly silenced the room. You have convened this gathering to pass judgment on my character and my property. Before your board attempts to legitimize any further illegal actions, I believe it is imperative that this community and you personally understand precisely whom you have been so cavalierly harassing, defaming, and attempting to extort. She paused, then opened her briefcase. She did not pull out gardening catalogs or neighborhood petitions. She withdrew a set of official-looking, leather-bound credentials and a folded black judicial robe. With deliberate, practiced movements, she unfolded the robe and slipped it on over her suit. It settled on her shoulders with an almost palpable weight of authority. She then held up her credentials for all to see, a United States federal judge's identification card. My name is Loretta Marie Hayes, she stated, her voice now imbued with the full, unwavering gravitas of the federal bench. I am a United States District Judge for the Southern Federal District, appointed by the President of the United States and confirmed by the United States Senate. For the past 18 years, I have had the honor of presiding over matters of federal law, including numerous landmark civil rights cases. A collective gasp, like the air being sucked out of the room, rippled through the clubhouse. Victor Sinclair's jaw dropped. His face, moments before flushed with tyrannical self-importance, turned a ghastly, chalky white. He stared at Loretta, at her robe, at her credentials, as if seeing a Medusa. Mildred's phone clattered to the floor. Gary the spray painter looked like he wanted to dissolve into the cheap paneling. A federal judge? Victor stammered, his voice a hoarse, terrified whisper. You can't be. Oh, but I am, Mr. Sinclair, Judge Hayes stated, her eyes like chips of obsidian. And your actions, and the actions of this homeowners association under your leadership, over the past several weeks, constitute a shocking and egregious litany of federal and state offenses. Ben Carter, her lead counsel, stepped forward, his voice like a legal avalanche. Mr. Victor Sinclair and attending members of the Willow Creek Manor HOA board, he announced as process servers, who had entered silently with Loretta's team, began efficiently serving thick legal documents to a now trembling Victor and his horrified board members. You are hereby served with this federal civil rights lawsuit, filed this morning in United States District Court. This lawsuit, filed on behalf of our client, the Honorable Loretta M. Hayes, seeks $4 million in compensatory and punitive damages for multiple willful violations of Judge Hayes' First, Fourth, and 14th Amendment constitutional rights. These violations include, but are not limited to, conspiracy to commit, and the actual commission of trespass, vandalism of private property, public defamation and slander per se, intentional infliction of severe emotional distress, abuse of HOA authority under color of law, and a clear pattern of racially motivated harassment and intimidation. Carter continued, his voice ringing with indignation. Furthermore, we are seeking an immediate federal temporary restraining order and preliminary injunction against any further actions by this HOA or its agents against Judge Hayes or her property. We will also be petitioning for a full federal audit of this HOA's finances, its governance practices, and its history of discriminatory enforcement. And yes, Mr. Sinclair, we will be seeking its court-ordered dissolution for pervasive and systemic illegal conduct. Victor Sinclair looked like he was about to have a stroke. He swayed, clutching his chest, his eyes wide with terror. $4 million? Federal court? Dissolution? He croaked. The crowd was in an uproar. She's a real federal judge, one neighbor shrieked. Victor, you monumental blithering idiot. You've been harassing a federal judge over a garden sign. You've ruined us all. Judge Hayes then spoke again, her voice cutting through the chaos, not as a judge in this sham HOA hearing, but as the plaintiff who had endured their abuse. Mr. Sinclair, your petty tyranny, your ignorance of the law, and your blatant prejudice have led you to this precipice. You sought to silence a voice, to deface beauty, to control what you did not understand. You called my personal garden sign advertising trash and fined me $300. Your association, under your direction, then escalated that to over $25,000 in baseless fines and threats of eviction. She paused, her gaze sweeping over the terrified faces of the board members. The fine, Mr. Sinclair, is withdrawn, the threats are nullified, and this so-called public censure hearing is an anachronism, a testament to your profound misunderstanding of due process and the rule of law. Instead, this homeowners association will issue an immediate, unequivocal, and very public apology to me, to be published on your website, in local newspapers, and read aloud at the next lawfully convened community meeting. You will also fully compensate me for the restoration of my private property, which you and your agents vandalized. Her lawyer then presented a meticulously drafted apology and settlement agreement, which Victor Sinclair, his hands shaking so violently he could barely hold the pen, was compelled to sign under the horrified gaze of his community and the flashing cameras of the legitimate local press, who had been alerted by Loretta's team and had arrived just in time to witness the spectacular implosion. The public humiliation of Victor Sinclair and the Willow Creek Manor HOA was swift and total. At an emergency neighborhood meeting a week later, chaired by a chastened and terrified interim HOA board, a stammering, broken Victor Sinclair read aloud the lengthy, court-approved apology to Judge Hayes, to a chorus of jeers and catcalls from his former supporters. He was immediately and unanimously voted out of the HOA presidency and stripped of all authority, his local reputation in irreparable ruins. The HOA, facing financial annihilation from the federal lawsuit, quickly moved to settle, agreeing to all of Judge Hayes' terms, including disbanding their garden purity subcommittee and undergoing mandatory civil rights and governance training for all board members. Judge Loretta Hayes, her dignity and property rights vindicated, had her beautiful Hayes Garden sign professionally restored. The following spring, to foster a new spirit of community and to subtly educate her neighbors, she hosted the first annual Hayes Garden Community Flower and Free Speech Festival in her yard, inviting all residents, except pointedly Victor Sinclair and his closest former cronies, to share flowers, food, and open dialogue. It was a resounding success. Her book on the Constitution in Your Backyard, Protecting Your Rights from HOA Overreach, became an unexpected national bestseller and a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize. The final, uniquely fitting scene, months later, a disgraced Victor Sinclair, his swagger long gone, is performing his court-ordered and HOA settlement-mandated community service. He's miserably, awkwardly cleaning and polishing all the other neighborhood signs. Welcome to Willow Creek Manor, street name signs, community event billboards, the very symbols of the public sphere he had tried to control with such prejudice. Some neighbors, including children who once trampled Loretta's flowers, walk by, offering him pitying or slightly mischievous smiles. One calls out, "Doing a good job there, Victor. Keep our signs looking respectable." He flinches, his face burning with shame. Judge Loretta Hayes is in her now thriving garden, perhaps showing a group of children how to identify different flowers. She looks at her restored Hayes garden sign, which now has a small, elegant plaque beneath it, a gift from her appreciative new HOA board reading, "Where Justice and Beauty Bloom." Her voiceover calm and wise. A garden, like justice, requires constant vigilance and careful cultivation. It thrives on light, on truth, on the freedom to grow without fear of arbitrary destruction. When you attempt to deface beauty, to silence expression, to trample on the rights of others, you are not just attacking an individual, you are poisoning the soil of the entire community. But justice, rooted in the firm ground of our Constitution, will always find a way to blossom. The camera focuses on the gleaming Hayes Garden sign, surrounded by vibrant flowers. The final graphic overlay from the prompt appears. Justice blooms. The imagined audience would erupt in cheers. That's a judicial masterpiece. Victor got a life sentence of sign polishing. Judge Hayes just laid down the law beautifully.